and welcome to this morning's Srimad-Bhagavatam class from ISKCON Dublin. I will start as ever by chanting the Jai Radha Madhava, and you're all welcome to join in at home and wherever you may be. Thank you. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajananjana, Yashodanandana Brajajananjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajananjana, Yashodanandana Brajajananjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajananjana, Yashodanandana Brajajananjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. A reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 14, The Disappearance of Lord Krishna. And today we have text 39. So I'll just chant the Sanskrit. Kachitte namayam tata brastate javibasime alabdamanu vajnata kimva tata chiroshita. Kachitte namayam tata brastate javibasime alabdamanu vajnata kimva tata chirosita. Kachitte namayam tata Brastateja vibhasime alabdhamanuvajnata kimva tata jirosita kachite namayantata brastateja vibhasime alabdhamanuvajnata kimva tata chiroshita kachite namayantata prastateja vibhasime alabdhamanu vajnata kimva tata chirosita kachite namayantata prastateja vibhasime alabdhamanu vajnata kimva tata chiroshita kachit weather te your anamayan health is all right tata my dear brother brasta bereft teja luster vibhasi appeared me to me alabdhamana without respect avagyata neglected kim whether va or tata my dear brother chiroshita because of long residence. Translation. My brother Arjuna, please tell me whether your health is all right. You appear to have lost your bodily luster. Is this due to others disrespecting and neglecting you because of your long stay at Dwarka? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. From all angles of vision, the Maharaj inquired from Arjuna about the welfare of Dwarka, but he concluded at last that as long as Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa himself was there, nothing inauspicious could happen. But at the same time, Arjuna appeared to be bereft of his bodily luster, and thus the king inquired of his personal welfare and asked so many vital questions. Translation again. My brother Arjuna, please tell me whether your health is all right. You appear to have lost your bodily luster. Is this due to others disrespecting and neglecting you because of your long stay at Dwarka? Om Jana Timrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Umlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svaya Rupagadamayam Dadati Swabarantikam. Jai Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gauda Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading today the verse in the purport reminded of Srila Prabhupada's sign of his letters, I hope this meets you in good health. So here a brother is asking another brother, Maharaj Yudhisthira, asking Arjuna to please tell him whether his health is okay. Of course he's asking it because then he says, you appear to have lost your bodily luster, or your radiance, your glow. So Arjuna appears to have lost that. And then Maharaj Yudhisthira, is this due to others disrespecting and neglecting you because of your long stay at Dwarka? And then Prabhupada is explaining in the purport that from all angles of vision, Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired from Arjuna about the welfare of Dwarka, because he concluded that as long as Lord Krishna was himself present at Dwarka, there'd be nothing inauspicious, everything would be fine. But then because Arjuna's lost his bodily luster and he's bereft, Maharaj Yudhishthira is asking these questions, how's your health, etc. And this chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, just the title alone, the disappearance of Lord Krishna, by definition that's nobody wants Lord Krishna to disappear. If you have the association and the sight of something so wonderful, so incredible, so glorious, so auspicious, so attractive, so compelling, so magnetizing, etc., then you simply would not want to lose it. Nobody in their right mind would want to lose that. So that's what's happening here, because the Lord Krishna is disappearing. So Arjuna, he's feeling bereft at this loss, because it's a huge loss, the direct association of Lord Krishna with Lord Krishna. And as is being described here, he's kind of lost his verve for life, if you like, and his bodily luster, his vitality. He's lost all that. And we learn in Bhagavad Gita, yad vibhutimat sattvam Srimad urjitam eva va, that Krishna is all opulent, and that we should know that anything that's opulent, anything that's beautiful and glorious, Krishna's explaining that all of that creation, all of that just comes from a spark of his splendor. So obviously when you're losing the person, or you appear to be losing the person, that person is disappearing from you, who can generate just by a spark of their splendor so much wonder and so much so much incredible opulence and beauty and all of those different qualities. It's only natural that you're going to feel bereft like that. That the opposite dynamic comes into effect from the dynamic of what you actually experience, that is coming from the source of that wonder and the source of that beauty. So when you're directly associating and connecting with that, obviously it's an extraordinary thing. And likewise, when you lose it, when it disappears, then it has the exact opposite dynamic, and it's an extremely painful experience, and you have to come to terms with it. And I'm sure we've always experienced, or we've all experienced, some loss in our life. Not on the same scale as Arjuna is experiencing here, but still loss. Maharaj Yudhishthira, who's asking the questions here of Arjuna, he's asking the questions, of course, in one sense, he's hoping that everything is okay, and that's why he's giving all these different possibilities as to why things don't appear right, because he's hoping that it will be okay. But it was Maharaj Yudhishthira himself who once responded to the question, and the question being, what's the most amazing thing that you've experienced in this material world? And Maharaj Yudhishthira's response was that the most amazing thing that I've experienced is that even though we've all experienced this loss that we're talking about today, the loss of a loved one, and of course nobody is more dear or more of a loved one than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in our own lives, when we've lost a loved one, so Maharaj Yudhishthira's response was, even though we've all experienced that in this lifetime, we all behave, carry ourselves, act in such a way in this particular lifetime that we have, we're all acting in such a way as though it will never happen to us. So that was a source of amazement for Maharaj Yudhisthira. So this sense of loss, bereavement, just leaves one, and of course the closer the relationship is to the person that we're losing, the greater it is, but it just leaves a vacuum, a big empty vacuum for us. And that word bereft is a very good word, actually. Just bereft, it's gone, you're stripped of that, it's taken away, it's you no longer have access, so you're bereft, and very disappointed like that. So this is what is happening here. No greater loss than anybody can have than loss of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As I say, Maharaj Yudhisthira is asking these questions in a way that he's trying to almost avoid hearing the inevitable. And he's coming up, so he's asking the questions, but he's also coming up with potential answers, if you like, hoping that they'll be the answers that he receives. And then it's interesting also in the purport, Prabhupada says, from all angles of vision, Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired from Arjuna about the welfare of Dwarka. And it's interesting, shortly after Dwarka, Krishna left, Dwarka also disappeared. And it's understood that Dwarka is now under sea. And the description of Dwarka that we get from Krishna book and other places is of an incredible, beautiful, opulent city, just directly reflecting the opulence of Krishna. I think, as we spoke before, Krishna had 16,108 wives, and each of them had an incredible palace in Dwarka. So you can just imagine just those palaces alone, the homes of Lord Krishna's wives, how incredible the place must have been. But it also disappeared, as I say, shortly after Krishna disappeared. Yeah, so you can imagine how extraordinary that must have been as well, these extraordinary events. But nonetheless, even though there's all this loss, all this bereavement, Arjuna feeling bereft, everybody feeling bereft, all of Krishna's followers feeling bereft like that, the wonderful thing is that all, as we've discussed, by default, by definition, that's going to have a massive impact on everybody. Everything at the same time can be immediately compensated by simply following the instructions of Lord Krishna. So that's exactly now what's happening with Arjuna and all the other close associates of Krishna, that they're effectively transitioning from the Vapu association that they had with Lord Krishna to the Vani association that they're now going to depend on. Vapu meaning the physical, personal association of the person, and and Vani means the association through instructions like that, through instructions and teachings. And Prabhupada explains in many places that actually the Vani, for us, the Vani is more important than the Vapu, like that. So that's what Arjuna is doing now. In one sense, he's transitioning. Of course, it's not that he wouldn't have been taking Krishna's Vani or Krishna's instruction while he was physically present, but the transition now is that he is going to have to exclusively rely on that for some time, rather than having that personal association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, last chapter, verse 65, that man manabhava mad bhakto mad yajmam namaskuru, that always think of me. And this is in essence the perfect way to take Krishna's instruction and to benefit from Vani. Krishna saying, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage to me, and then you'll come to me without fail. And he's talking to Arjuna, so he says, I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. And as I say, that's one of the last instructions Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita. So a very important instruction. And it's for all of us. That's not just for Arjuna. Arjuna was the direct recipient in Vapu association. He was getting this instruction. But it's for all of us. Worship me, become my devotee, always think of me. And then you will come to me. So Krishna's giving us that guarantee. If we simply can engage in his service and always think of him, then we will come to him like that. And there will be no bereavement, there's no loss, there's no bereftness. That won't exist simply if we have that meditation on Krishna, on Krishna's lotus feet. So in essence, that's the perfection of our life, the perfection of everyone's life. That if we can simply cultivate a desire to follow that instruction of Lord Krishna, then Krishna's personal association will be easily achieved. Krishna's giving us the guarantee, you will come to me. Of course, the flip side of that coin is that the flip side is if we don't have such a desire to cultivate that love for Krishna, then our lives become so problematic, they become troublesome, and ultimately they become miserable. And reality, that is the situation for the vast majority of people. Vast majority of people in the material world. There's a very small percentage of people in the material world who are thinking of Krishna, and there's an even smaller amount of people who are always thinking of Krishna. So for all of those persons, they don't have that guarantee that Krishna's giving, that you will come to me. So somehow or another we've got to help them. We may also not be thinking of Krishna 24/7, and that's the whole process of sadhana bhakti, the practice of spiritual life, the practice of Krishna consciousness, that we practice and practice until we become perfect, until it becomes natural. I can remember, I'll give a personal example. I can remember thinking how, well no, let me not give a personal example. A better example, I think, is if you look at young kids when they're learning to cycle, they start with having those thingamajigs, what they call stabilizers on the back of the bike. They have the stabilizers to help them not fall off from side to side. And then, sometimes kids can have those stabilizer things on for years. But eventually, at some point, the parents will take the stabilizers off and they'll see if the child can cycle without them. And eventually all children succeed in that endeavour. But it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. They can't just, as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, they can't just jump on a bike without any stabilizers and suddenly fly off into the sunset with no problem. No, they would fall off the bike, and that's why the stabilizers are there to help them. They practice up those on, etc., and then eventually take them off, and even then they'll be a little wobbly for some time, but eventually they should be okay. So practice makes perfect, we have that English saying, and it's the same in developing a relationship with Krishna, that we may not always, but it's not going to be automatic that we can just think of Krishna 24/7, but we have to practice doing that, and the more that we practice it, the more we'll eventually become perfect. But whatever stage we're at in that process of practicing to remember Krishna 24/7, whatever stage we're at, the other thing that we should try to do is be like the parents to their children and try to help and encourage others to do the same. Because wherever we are in that process, you can be sure we're light years ahead of so many other people in the material world who, for many of them, aren't even thinking of Krishna. So the first thing is we've got to introduce Krishna to them, and then once we do that, gradually we can help them to raise their level of awareness of Krishna and raise the duration of time that they're able to think of Krishna until, as I say, it becomes 24/7. I remember one time, Srila Prabhupada was on a morning walk, chanting Hare Krishna on a japa walk, and he passed by a golf club, and he saw people playing golf, and he apparently shed a tear when he saw that, and the reason that he shed a tear was he was thinking, this inordinate amount of time, I think it takes roughly about 4 hours actually to have a round of golf, and he shed a tear because he was just thinking the inordinate amount of time that people are spending in this pursuit. And what is the pursuit? The pursuit is hitting a ball, and then repeating it 18 times. You hit the ball and you're trying to get it in some small hole, a number of hundreds of yards or hundreds of meters away from you. And then once you eventually get it in, you repeat that 18 times because there's 18 holes on a golf course. So Prabhupada shed a tear because he was just feeling this was so sad, that the precarious situation that we all find ourselves in the material world, and then you have people essentially wasting their time in this pursuit of trying to get this small, little ball into a hole hundreds of meters away like that. So it was interesting. Prabhupada kind of shed a tear because he just felt it was so sad, because obviously they could be spending that time trying to understand who they are, eternal spirit souls as opposed to temporary material bodies, understanding what our place is in the cosmic manifestation, what our place is in the creation, understanding who's behind the creation, who's responsible for it, and then understanding what our relationship is with that person, Krishna, who's behind the creation. So these are all the really big questions of our existence, and big questions of our lives, and questions that we want to, one, find the answers to, and then by knowing those answers, then find the solution, how we transition. Arjuna's transitioning from a Vapu to a Vani relationship right here now with Lord Krishna. But we're in this material world, we have to try, the same thing, we have to have that relationship and transition from not having any relationship with Krishna to having a relationship with Krishna, and transitioning ourselves from our existence in the material world to transition or transfer ourselves to the spiritual world, which is our true home, because we're eternal spiritual beings like that. So Prabhupada, he was reflecting sadness at the fact that people weren't doing that, and instead they're in this material world and they're lost in it. They're trying to extract happiness and pleasure, of which they can extract a certain amount, but nothing that will ever satisfy them. We're all eternally pleasure-seeking entities. So that's natural. It's natural that people want to be happy. It's natural that people seek out pleasure. But the sadness is that they're seeking it out in a way that won't satisfy them, because nothing material, nothing material can satisfy the spirit. It's just a contradiction in terms, a rasa basa as we call it. It can't be achieved. And that's the whole process of Krishna consciousness, and the whole process of presenting Krishna consciousness is just to get people to transition from that, to understand that, yes, wanting to be happy is perfectly normal. It's our constitutional position. So that's perfectly fine. Everyone seeking that happiness is doing the right thing in seeking it. It's just that they're seeking it in the wrong place, and that's what we as devotees try to do. We try to, and it's not by beating them over the head, of course, because the more you beat people over the head, the less they'll listen to you. It's doing it in a way that they'll be receptive to hearing and understanding that point, that yes, wanting to be happy is perfect, but you just happen to be currently seeking it in the wrong way, and here's the right way. So just transition over to that. So that whole point about, as I say, Prabhupada seeing these people being distracted and essentially wasting their time. In this case, it was playing golf. It could be millions of other things, of course. We won't single out golf as such. It could be a million. You could argue even that golf isn't the worst, if you like. You know, it's a relatively mode of goodness activity out in the open, walking around in nature, kind of thing. But still, it's not. You know, it's still a waste of time, because you're not seeking out that which will satisfy that insatiable desire you have for happiness. The only thing that will satisfy that will satiate that, is service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a distraction. But I was just thinking that another distraction that seems to have become so much more, it's not that it was non-existent when I was younger, but it seems to have become so much more prevalent in our modern day society, is this thing that they call conspiracy theories, where, you know, people come up with obscure, wacky even. In fact, the more obscure, the more wacky the theory is that someone comes up with, somehow or another, it potentially gains more traction. So it's not that they didn't exist previously, but I think they've been aided and abetted in recent times, accelerated in recent times, due to the phenomena known as social media, the internet and social media like that, and how people now, as I say, no matter how kind of obscure or strange that their thoughts or ideas may be, that they can go on social media and they can immediately get validation from like-minded people. There's this phrase that people use, echo chamber, that you can go into an echo chamber, and of course what that means is that everything that reflects back, everything that echoes back, is supporting your point of view. So this can feel great, and as I say, no matter how kind of grotesque or unbelievable, bizarre or unprecedented your idea may be, if you go into an echo chamber, it'll just come back that, you know, you'll get validation and support for that idea or that theory like that. And that's particularly dangerous because it feeds into the illusion that everyone is supporting your view, however obscure, however wacky it might be. And of course that's just a complete illusion. It's just that you just happen to be in an echo chamber only hearing one point of view. But anyway, this is a more modern day distraction. Golf is still there, of course, but this is a more modern day distraction. And indeed the world in general is really grappling with this whole phenomena, trying to figure out how to separate reality from the illusion, and they've even coined the phrase now, you know, fake news. So trying to separate that illusion, that those lies, etc., trying to separate those out from what actual reality is. So, as I say, you know, this kind of world is kind of grappling with that and trying to figure out, how to deal with that. But one of a part of this, if you like, part of this dynamic that recently struck me as quite interesting, was the connection between many of these conspiracy theories and the prophecies, or what are seen as prophecies, of what you might call, you know, conservative religious groups like that. So we all be familiar with phrases like, you know, the end of the world is nigh, the apocalypse, Armageddon, doomsday. You know, these are all very kind of catastrophic terms. And those concepts in and of themselves, they're nothing new. They've been around, well, for as long as I've been in this lifetime, at least, as long as I've been around, they've been around. So those concepts are nothing new. And I can remember as a kid being kind of, if you like, indoctrinated, for want of a better word, with, you know, a nuclear war being imminent. I grew up as a kid. There was the tension between the Americans and the Russians, and somehow or another it centered over Cuba, and there was a real threat that nuclear bombs or nuclear weapons were going to be used. And really ever since that, it kind of goes up and down from time to time, but ever since that kind of threat has been there. So these what would you call them? The potential for that kind of Armageddon, doomsday, the end of the world is nigh, etc. That's kind of been around a long time. And then, 20 odd years ago, we had another kind of craze or another kind of interesting distraction called Y2K, where everybody thought that when the clock on all computers turned from 1999 to 2000, it was going to create havoc and there was going to be all sorts of disruption and whatever in the world. And of course that came and went. And now more recently, we have phenomena like global warming, climate change, etc. And now most recently of all, we have the pandemic, and all of these are kind of threats to our existence. But in reality, while many of those things, all of those things, have proved worrisome for many, that they've never been a threat to the existence of our world. Here we have today in the Bhagavatam, we're reading about Lord Krishna's disappearance. So what a phenomenal event that must have been. And as I say, even Dwarka, the whole beautiful city of Dwarka, disappearing shortly after Krishna had left. What an extraordinary event that must have been. But actually, life went on, in terms of the existence of the universe, etc. And we understand also from Srimad-Bhagavatam, these things are all mapped out, and it's clear to us how long this world that we currently reside in, how long it will continue to exist for. So in many ways, the idea that the end of the world is nigh, etc., and all of these things, there's an element of arrogance there, thinking that things that we can do, whether they be pandemic related, Y2K related, nuclear weapons related, that somehow or another we're thinking that we have the power and we have the potency and to destroy this world. For sure, we can destroy aspects of it, no doubt about it, but to be able to destroy it in its entirety, it absolutely is simply not the case. But then connected to that, so one aspect is quite arrogant for us to think like that, but then connected to that is just this kind of illusion about doomsday and the end of the world is nigh, because it's presented, or at least it comes across. If it's not, maybe it's unintentional, or I don't think that it is unintentional. But the way that it comes across is that it's an event. But actually it's not an event. It's a constant. It's a constant. And that is so misleading for everybody. It kind of, well, one thing about the event also is that people then, based on their belief, and belief is an interesting thing, because just because I believe something does not mean that it's true. So people convince themselves on the basis of belief, they convince themselves that, they're going to be saved from this apocalypse, saved from this doomsday scenario, saved from the Armageddon, saved from the end of the world whenever in their mind it is coming. They convince themselves through the process of belief that they're going to be saved, and therefore this event, they package it as an event, and then they convince themselves they're going to be protected from that event. So, I'm all right, Jack, everything's fine, and we move on. But of course it's not an event, it's a constant. And the reality is that, and I think there's someone famously said that it is the end of the world every single day for someone. So Armageddon, doomsday, etc., whatever term you want to put on it, because that's what it is. If some big tsunami comes and drowns us all, or some big earthquake comes and kills us all, whatever like that, you're leaving your body, or what we commonly call dying. You're leaving your body. But the fact is that that's happening, and that quote that the end of the world is coming for someone every day. Let me put some figures on that. Every day, according to official statistics, somewhere in the region of 150,000 people die every single day. So for them, those 150,000, that's the end of the world. It's not a doomsday, Armageddon, that they've reached that. So it's not an event, it's a constant. And going back to Maharaj Yudhisthira, Anyan Bhutani, I think is the Sanskrit, that the most amazing thing is that everyone has experienced someone in this life that has left, that has died. In my own case, for instance, all my grandparents have passed away, and both of my parents have passed away. So, you know, even one of my siblings has actually passed away. So we all have that experience of someone passing away, yet we tend to live our lives as though it's not going to happen to us. And then we create all these, you know, illusions around that to sort of satisfy, to be able to push it aside. So again, like I say, we present the idea of leaving this world as an event, a one-off event. It's not a one-off event at all. It's 150,000 times every single day. And our time will come. Our time, we're just in the queue, if you like, and our time will come. So we create all these things to try to blot that out and avoid thinking about it like that. So that's what we've first off got to avoid doing for ourselves, and rather than blotting it out, do what Krishna advises in the Bhagavad Gita, to always think of him. No, we don't blot out the transition from the material world to our next existence. We don't blot it out at all. We try to make that transition as perfect as possible, and the perfection is to go back to the spiritual world where we can continue our service to Krishna in completeness, eternity and blissfulness, etc. In completeness. So really we should be meditating. That's another phrase that Prabhupada used one time. Real philosophy, so we can talk philosophy, etc. But real philosophy always means to keep death right in front of you. You're conscious of it, you're aware of it, and it's only by being conscious of it and being aware of it that you can actually do something about it like that, rather than trying to push it off into a one-off event that doesn't really affect us because we're saved anyway like that. So we're all facing our Armageddon, and we have to transition from this material body. Once we accept a material body, which we all have, then we have to leave it, because the material body is temporary and we're eternal. As I say, let's focus on great devotees like Maharaj Yudhishthira. In one sense, he was trying to avoid the inevitable. Of course, he didn't in the end. And focus on great devotees like his brother Arjuna, who did perfectly transition from the Vapu to the Vani like that. And we've got to realise, somehow or another, we've got to realise, and we've got to help others to realise, that by doing this, by following that instruction of Lord Krishna to always think of him, such a simple instruction, always think of me. And if we can achieve that, then we, along with everybody else, can enter into the deepest mysteries and the secrets and the uniqueness of our eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In one sense, Arjuna had more reason than anyone to be utterly depressed and despondent due to the loss of the most astonishing, the most wonderful Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa. However, simply by following the instructions of his dearmost Lord and his dearmost friend indeed, he again attained that personal association shortly after. But that's a pastime. Krishna's relationship with Arjuna, and all parts of that pastime are actually instructions for us. So we shouldn't think that somehow or other that's available to Arjuna and not available to us. No, it's available to every single one of us. It's just a question of following that instruction of Lord Krishna. Always think of me and become my devotee, and then you will come to me. I give you that guarantee. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope in the next 24 hours you can up your remembrance of Krishna by a few hours, by a few minutes, even by a few seconds. But as long as we're heading in the right direction, then ultimately we will be achieving perfection shortly. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.